Compensation is incomparable to compromise. Although synonymous, they are not the same. The self-deprivation found within compensation is incomparable to the agreement found within a compromise. When you are supplementing your individual desires at the request and or for the purpose of your given and or chosen collective, you are compensating for what it is you truly want and or need. Within a past relationship, and more specifically within a past friendship, I rarely granted myself the access to the word no, especially when yes was not my most authentic and would have not been my most authentic response. I always responded to any inquiry or request with a yes. I developed a proficiency and fluency within the language of yes. No became so distant within my vocabulary that it became such a foreign word for me to use, and even further, such a foreign objective to comprehend. The power of no. I minimized the power no yielded within relationships, the necessity for no within relationships. Although I always understood that no yielded a great power, I still minimized it within my various relationships. And within every yes spoken, there was still hidden underneath a no. And this is to no blame other than myself. I take full accountability for my actions and for the things that I said and the things that I did. I did this all at my own free will, yet when you're a person like myself who often thinks macroly in order to perceive things microscopically, at times it's hard to separate yourself from the collective when individually you are experiencing a depletion. Whenever I think of myself, I think of others. Whenever I think for myself, I always think of how self impacts the collective. So oftentimes I think macroly in order to think microly. So what I'm essentially trying to express is that in the various occasions where I would say yes, I was doing myself a disservice, because when I began to say no, it was perceived as if I was selfish, as if I was unyielding, unwilling, and quite pessimistic, when in fact, the various times and occasions where I would say yes, I genuinely wanted to say no. I was a part of this relationship where it was kind of like, and excuse my language, it was like you're damned if you do or you're damned if you don't. There would be times where I would say yes to certain festivities that I wasn't too fond of, but for the sake of the collective, I was willing to partake in. So there would be occasions that I would attend that I really wasn't interested in, so I never expressed or displayed interest while I was in those environments. If you invite me to someone's house, or if we're going to a specific location or around specific people and I'm not really into it, I'm not going to be into it. So there would be occasions within that relationship where they would always mention how I'm always in my phone or how I'm always to myself and quite inverted. And naturally, that's just how I am. Throughout high school, middle school, elementary school, I've always just been an introverted person. Although I have an extroverted personality when I'm with loved ones and friends, I tend to be quite introverted. I have no difficulty being alone with myself. But I say all this to say, naturally when I'm in those environments, I am going to be quite inverted. And it will intensify when I'm in environments that I don't really want to be in, or when I'm around people that I'm not really fond of. So when I was in those occasions, I was really compensating, although I perceived it as a compromise, quite comparable to the analogy of truth or dare. For myself, I would be a three-dimensional cube, whereas my friends would be two-dimensional squares. Although truth is something that I'm most comfortable with expressing, although truth is my most preferred choice, I may choose a dare for the sake of liveliness that the collective is seeking. The two-dimensional squares prefer dares, while my cube prefers truth. But because I am a squared truther in a collective of daredevils, I may choose a dare just for the sake of enjoyment. And although it may not be the absolute enjoyment of myself, I do it for others. And not saying that this is a fault to any other person than myself, but I just wanted to speak to why certain things happen the way that they do happen. And I share my experiences, hopefully to prevent the younger generation from experiencing what I experienced, or just to better dissect the experiences of myself to further assist my elders, So basically, like I said, it's very similar to the truth or dare analogy, because you may have this squared truther that is most comfortable with expressing their truth, and their most preferred choice is the truth, but they will choose the dare for the sake of the collective, for the sake of a peer pressure that they feel when they're with their collective. For myself, within relationships, I never want to be the pessimistic individual. I always attempt to be as optimistic as possible, yet I am a very rational person. So whenever I've been a part of various relationships where I've been the square truther amongst daredevils, I find that this conscious pursuit of optimism has prevented me from remaining absolutely true to what it is I need and I want. So as I stated previously, various occasions where I would say no would be perceived as selfish and unwilling and unyielding, especially when it became more frequent than it had ever been within the initiation of that relationship. There was this occurrence where a group of my friends wanted to go to the pool, and I was more than willing to do so, yet I had stipulations and a mandate that I would not be getting into the body of water. I didn't care if we went to the pool, the water park, the beach. I was willing to go to any aquatic setting and or environment. I have no difficulty with swimming, just physically, personally, and naturally, I was not willing to get into the water. Naturally, Mother Nature had her own calling. Physically, I was not in a space where I felt comfortable with displaying my assets. And personally, emotionally, I just wasn't in the proper mindset for that type of activity, but I wanted to be with the collective, and I didn't mind a poolside view. And also just the people that we were going with, I just wasn't really comfortable with that. So personally, physically, and naturally, I didn't want to get into the pool. Yet this became a really big issue within our relationship, and at the moment it became quite confrontational within our exchange, because I said no. I was unwilling and unyielding to change my stance on that topic. I feel like there was a clear compromise. I was willing to go wherever they wanted me to go, just regulating myself I was not getting into the water. I don't really understand how that affected the entire group, but I feel like that went back to when I'm in environments that I'm not comfortable within, I become unattentive and detached. So I feel like that was revealing itself within that conversation. But basically, I feel like I set a clear compromise. I was willing to go. This is just one thing that I was unwilling to do. And this created a lot of indifference within our relationship. But it was revealing. It was revealing to how you have to be willing to be honest with yourself and to your collective, or else you may find yourself in confrontations like myself. You may find yourself in circumstantial situations like I found myself within when I decided to go to the pool but not partake in the festivities. I think because I was so often saying yes to the various things I didn't want to do, when I said no, it was something hard to really receive, I guess. So essentially, hopefully this all makes sense, but you have to be willing to say yes when it's most authentic to the circumstance, and no when it's most authentic to the circumstance as well. If you need to say yes, say yes. If you need to say no, say no. But understand the power that both words yield within relationships and for yourself, or else you will experience a level of deprivation that is often associated to compensation. Compromise will never leave you as depleted as compensation will. You know, there was also an occurrence where these group of friends wanted to do the Before I Let Go challenge. And although I admire and appreciate the artistry that is Beyonce, Giselle, Knowles Carter, I was just not willing to partake in the challenge. It was not something I felt prompted to do. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. And it really wasn't a part of my personal aesthetic and or brand. Like, I don't do challenge videos that involve me dancing. Like, that's just not me. So usually I probably would have said yes, embarrassed myself doing dances that I don't really feel comfortable with, and just did it for the sake of everyone else. But because I was going through something much more deeper than that relationship, I really was put into a place and a mindset where I was more than willing to say no to anybody and everything. So I said no because I did not want to do it. And when I said no, it was, you just don't want to do what everyone else wants to do. Every time we present something to you, you don't want to do it. And it's like, well, obviously, if I'm saying no to everything that you're presenting, of course I do understand where they're coming from. But at the same time, it's like understanding the situation at the time, there was more room for compromise than anything else. You already know how I am. Like, I don't do that. That's just not something I do. Not that I'm against, doing dance moves that are a little more specific and really show off the assets or really embrace a culture like African, indigenous dancing, but I just was not, that's just something I didn't want to do, basically. So, yeah, hopefully this wasn't too much of a tangent, as I intended for it to be more of a discussional based video, but hopefully you received something from this. Hopefully you understand the difference of compensation and compromise. Compensation is not compromise, and compromise is not compensation. When you compensate, you are not allowing yourself access to the things that you need and want as much as you are for others. So you have to be willing to compromise. And sometimes when compromising, you have to say no. You can say no. You need to say no because you want to say no.